Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. So today we're going to be going through the Thursday, October 11th polls and then the Friday, October 12th polls that do have a lot of information from them. So we're going to have to go through them pretty quickly, but also covering a lot of information there. So right now, looking at this data, a little bit more of a spread in terms of what we're seeing now in red and blue, because typically we just see a lot of blue down the map and not a lot of red, but we're actually starting to see a little bit more red than previously expected. And looking at a couple of these races, they're actually a little bit more contested than I personally expected as well. Looking at these races and analyzing them for months, I mean really months, since 2017 actually, and now all of a sudden they're getting a little bit more contested than they were before, isn't too unexpected, but going in the favor of an opposition party that they've never gone in before definitely says something about the race itself. And I think a lot of you do know which state I'm talking about, and that is the state of Nevada, which shows Dean Heller leading by 2%. Now, a 2% lead isn't necessarily the worst thing for the Democratic Party, but it isn't good for them. Having a New York Times poll, which shows you exactly where they're getting their information from, definitely says that their poll is pretty accurate compared to the other ones, which leave out a lot of information as to where they're getting their information from, but it also could say that this could be just an abnormal poll. But looking at that NBC News poll and that CNN poll, this race definitely is going to be a little bit more contested than previously expected. This is a Hillary Clinton state. Okay, making that argument alone, you could think that this race would be a little bit more in the favor of the Democratic Party. But unfortunately for them, it is not. Dean Heller is now leading in the most recent poll by 2%, and then in the most recent poll before that by 2%. That's not a good sign for Jackie Rosen. This is a race that should be in their column. Again, Hillary Clinton state. Donald Trump is doing horrible in states that he won in 2016, but somehow a state Hillary Clinton won is now in the favor of the GOP. A 2% lead, again, the Democrats can come back from that, but it's going to be pretty hard for them, to say the least. Especially looking at this state, because there's a GOP incumbent, it isn't one of those Democratic states which have a Democratic incumbent, because incumbents definitely do matter, and I don't think people realize the full extent of that. In the Wisconsin Senate race, though, Baldwin now leading by 14% isn't the worst thing. And it isn't good for the GOP whatsoever, but a 14% lead is probably around what I would say, maybe 11 to 13, possibly reaching out to 14, but that's probably the cap for the Democrats in the state of Wisconsin. And keep in mind, again, like I said before, this is a state Trump won in 2016, but a Democrat is leading by 14%, but in the state Hillary Clinton won, a GOP incumbent is leading by 2%. Very interesting. Could just be the incumbents themselves. In the Michigan Senate race, Debbie Stabenow leads by 9%. This actually has narrowed down from where it was before. It's pretty surprising seeing Wisconsin a little bit more in the favor of the Democrats than the state of Michigan, because looking at this data from previous races, I mean, she's always had a double-digit lead. There is never a time when Debbie Stabenow did not until now. But again, a 9% lead is a lead nonetheless. A win is a win. So it doesn't matter how the margin goes. That's 6 more years to whichever party wins there, and another seat to add to the Senate composition in the favor of that party. So Michigan could be +1 for the Democrats leading into the election day, and they win by 1%. It's the same as if they won by 23%. Just 6 years from now, Debbie Stabenow will probably have to do a little bit more recovering her voting base. But again, looking at the data itself isn't necessarily the worst, and the GOP could necessarily come back from a 9% lead with the Democrats, but I'm thinking that more data as we go into the 2018 election season, very close. I mean, weeks away. We are weeks away right now. I mean, like 2 weeks, possibly 1 week away. And this race actually could expand for the Democratic Party. In the Texas Senate race, Ted Cruz leads by 9%. That is not a good sign for Beto O'Rourke. Unfortunately for him, a 9% lead is probably something that's going to be really hard to recover from looking at the numbers. In the state of Michigan, it is possible for the GOP because Debbie Stabenow has 51% of the voters. According to this Quinnipiac poll, Ted Cruz has 54%. So it's not like all these undecided voters are just not voting in the poll. They are voting, but in the favor of the GOP. Beto O'Rourke is pretty much capping off at 45%. If we look at the data that he's pretty much been contested in, it's 42, 44, 45, 43, whereas Ted Cruz is 47 at his lowest, 50 at his second lowest, and 51 to 54. So a lot more Texas people are more comfortable saying they're voting for Ted Cruz than ever before. And that could just be that Beto O'Rourke may not be campaigning as much, which I don't believe or don't agree with. It could be that Ted Cruz is now all of a sudden taking this race a lot more seriously than before. Whichever reason it may be, the GOP is leading nonetheless by pretty good margins. And we're actually going to see, according to this Friday polls, that they actually solidify what we're seeing now, according to the New York Times. In the Massachusetts Senate race, Warren leads by 25%. I don't know why that race would ever be polled. It's not going to be contested for the GOP. In the Michigan governor race, though, Bill Schuette is behind Gretchen Whitmer by 8%. This is a race currently held by the GOP. And again, it isn't necessarily the worst thing for the GOP to be behind by 8% because it is technically possible to come back. But leading into this late into the election season is going to be very, very hard. In the Wisconsin governor race, Tony Evers, whatever, leads by 10%. So Walker led by 1% yesterday. I just covered those polls, and they're uploading right now. And then looking at the Wisconsin governor race, now the Democrat leads by 10%. So I don't think it'll be a 10% lead. I don't think it'll be 10% win, for either political party. I do think it could narrow down, but I think that this could be a Democratic win at the end of the day. In the California governor race, this is very interesting. Wisconsin is probably going to, according to this poll, vote for the Democrats around the same as the state of California. Now, Gavin Newsom isn't necessarily unpopular. It's just more that some people could be more in support of different policies. Gavin Newsom right now leading by 12%. Again, a win is a win. John Cox, people thought could necessarily win. I'm not seeing it. I'm not seeing the real argument for it. But right now, looking at the numbers, Gavin Newsom leads by 12%, and that's unavoidable. In the state of Texas, the governor's race there, Greg Abbott leads by 20%. This race I previously had in the likely GOP column, and then I moved it into the safe column, and this just only solidifies what I believed in for this race itself. In the Massachusetts governor race, though, Baker leads by 38%. That is phenomenal. But keep in mind that the Baker is the most popular governor in the United States as a Republican from a Democratic state. That's surprising. Keep in mind, Massachusetts has all Democratic representatives, from their House of Representatives races. And now looking at the governor's race, for some reason there is a GOP incumbent, which could be a little bit unexpected for those who don't really know U.S. politics 100%. But looking at the way that the campaigns were ran and the candidates he ran against in 2014, it's not too unexpected to see why, or too surprising as to see why he would win and possibly could win re-election, especially looking at how he's being viewed now. Looking at the Washington 8th District race, Rossi, I believe, ran for a number of races before, but always lost, now leading by 10% according to this House race, so he could go on to go from the state of Washington to Washington, D.C. for the House of Representatives. Direction of the country, wrong track +8. That actually conflicted with the data that I just discussed just earlier today. Wrong track +21, +16, and now it's +8. Again, we always see a lot of information from that, but it doesn't really have necessarily the best say on what happens in 2018. But now we can move over into some Senate races, a governor's race, and a Florida 27th District race that all favor the GOP in every single one of these polls, including the President Trump job approval rating. Looking at the Tennessee Senate race, Marsha Blackburn now leading by 14%. And guess the pollster, the New York Times, one of the more accurate polling companies, now shows the Republican leading by 14% in a state that the Democrats thought they would have a shot at picking up in 2018. Looking at the data from previous races, Blackburn now leads by 5.5%, but there was never really a time where Marsha Blackburn led in any of the polls before October. Leading into October, all of a sudden, Marsha Blackburn takes the lead. Now, it could be because the primaries are over, but it likely is because of that and also a number of other factors. Trump definitely bringing back voters in terms of some more contested races. The Kavanaugh thing definitely does say a lot about the race itself. So when we're talking about the way that voters do take a number of national events, Republicans are probably more excited than they were before. Yes, Phil Bredesen did say he would have casted his vote in favor of Brett Kavanaugh, but again, that's probably not the issue. The issue was the fact that the Democrats did obstruct it, and it was because they were able to convince every Democrat except for one, even though 9 of them, except for that one, is up in states that Trump won in 2016. So it could just say a little bit to voters that maybe Phil Bredesen could turn on them in the Senate. This is a 6-year term, so it's going to take a long time for them to get him out. This is not some House race where his one vote could make or break his re-election campaign. Yes, it technically could, but in 6 years from now. So Blackburn leading by 14% could have to do with heightened Republican excitement, which they really shouldn't be having because this is a quote-unquote Democratic wave year, and also a number of other factors that could just be with the candidates themselves. Looking at the Texas Senate race, Ted Cruz now leading by 8% according to the New York Times. That is not good for the Democratic Party. They thought this race could be contested, but Cruz leading with 51% of the votes says that this race technically could be recovered, but we have 24 days away, and we are probably not going to see any drastic changes in the races unless any October surprises are truly surprises looking at our current political climate. Looking at the Georgia's governor race, plus 2% for Ryan Kemp. The exact same numbers we've been seeing in recent events. Plus 2% is a favorite number from the state of Georgia. Not unexpected, not surprising, exactly what I did expect from the state of Georgia. Brian Kemp now leading Stacey Abrams by 2%. In the 27th district, this is a race the GOP thinks they could hold on to, but the Democrats are very optimistic in. And right now, the GOP is leading by 2%. A mere 2%. but still a lead nonetheless. A win is a win. So if they're able to hold on to this race, that's one they take away from the Democratic Party, and one less that they one more that the Democrats need to take back the majority in 2018. Looking at the President Trump job approval rating, these polls necessarily benefit the Democrats. Benefit the GOP because they show the president with a 49% approval rating, but that isn't too trustable. Rasmussen Reports is never trusted by many people in the mainstream media. I'm not calling myself the mainstream media. I don't want anyone to paint it that way or take it that way. But disapprove +1, of course, is good for the GOP. But also we have to look at other data because Rasmussen Reports probably isn't the only one that could be accurate in terms of the president's job approval rating. But again, you can believe whichever polling companies you want, but also if you take that, you also have to admit the other data that comes with these Rasmussen Reports polls in terms of the generic ballot and other influential factors on the 2018 midterm elections. So that pretty much wraps up today's video. Thank you guys for watching this video. Comment down suggestions below, and I will see you all tomorrow.